hear from him. He has a very, very, very good way of explaining what he does. Please, Mr. Mezuo, could you take us through your career, what you help, what has gotten you up to this point, and why agribusiness?
Great. Good to be here. Welcome, everyone, and I'm glad to share my stories of my experiences. And of course, at the end, happy to take questions. And I've had an interesting career journey, to put it mildly. I'll just start. I was born in Lagos. Parents were university professors at Unilag. I grew up at Unilag campus. Went to ISL, went to Hillcrest in Jos, went to the US for university. Worked in the US for a number of years in investment banking. I was corporate finance with a firm in Dallas, then JP Morgan in New York, then came back to Nigeria to work and worked in oil and gas, telecoms, financial services, and then was a partner at a private equity firm in Senegal before I left in 2010 to set up first Ace Foods, then Sahel Consulting, then Sahel Capital. So worked in different industries, but the past 15 years has been very focused on agribusiness.
Thanks. So I have seen your schools, and in one of the videos I saw about you, the first thing I noticed is you're actually, I would say, a Unilag person, but you went to Ivy League. I want to ask, why did you focus on Africa? You could have done anything. You could have gone to anywhere. Why Africa? Why Nigeria? Why Western Eastern Africa?
So it's an interesting question. So I graduated when I graduated from university in the US. I had an offer to join a firm in Dallas. And at that time, I was agnostic on whether to work in Africa, whether to work in the US. I was just happy to graduate, happy to have a good job to go to. And my job started in September. So I had 2-3 months. So I decided to come back to Lagos and spend the summer effectively hanging out, spending time with friends. And during that summer, I went to the airport to pick up my sister. And I happened to run into a friend of mine at the airport, who is now my wife. But then she was a friend, and asked her what she was doing. And she had an offer with McKinsey in the US, but I'd come back to Nigeria to intern for the summer. And when I heard that, I was like, hey, this sounds interesting. And I ended up getting an internship in the same building where she was interning. So very strategic from a context perspective. And the 2 months I spent interning with a firm called SecTrust, it's now AfriInvest. I really enjoyed that experience, working at home, feeling that the people I worked with, colleagues, could also be friends outside the office. And then when I returned to the US to start my real job in the US, I was learning a lot, but it did not feel the same. It didn't feel the same. And so at the back of my mind, it was always sort of a context of, what would it be like to really work in Nigeria or in Africa? Is there really an opportunity? Or was that 2 months I interned just, an internship, unique experience, everything positive, not the negatives? So I decided to, after JP Morgan, to come back to Nigeria for 1 or 2 years. And the way I thought about it was, if I came back and had a terrible experience, I'll go to business school and then stay in the US. And if I came back and had a great experience, I'll go to business school and come back. And needless to say, I went to business school and came back. And the 2 years I spent working in Nigeria before business school, I was involved in starting an internet cafe chain. It was a good time, and I really liked that I felt I could have a rewarding career and also have impact in people's lives. And for example, the internet cafe chain that I started with a number of friends, we had a location in Unilag, in Medilag, in Abeokuta, we had another one in Ikeja. And we were employing lots of young people. And this was the time when, it was hard to get into the connections. You had to go to the internet cafe to send emails, etc. It just felt very rewarding. And so for me, I made up my mind that, post-business school, I would come back and then see how to have some impact in what I'm doing, either building a business or working.
Okay. Thanks. So before I go into more of this conversation, did anything about the beautiful lady you met at McKinsey have anything to do with this?
Well, so I said the way I would say the link is the if I had not run into her at the airport, I probably would have gone back to the US, and I wouldn't have thought too deeply about coming back to work in Nigeria because I wouldn't have had that experience. But I think once I had that experience, it triggered that, you know, it just triggered that it made sense. Now, interestingly enough, so many of you probably know my wife, Ididi, and both of us have been very aligned over the years about our desire to have impact and make a difference in Nigeria and on the continent. And that alignment, even for her own career journey, was in the US for a number of years, business school, and then some years after business school, also returned to Nigeria. So, so we've been very aligned in our desire to see how to build businesses, enterprises, and make a difference. So it's helped that our motivations have been very similar over the last 30 odd years we've known each other.
Yeah, just asking because I want her to always tell you I'm the reason you came back to Nigeria. So whenever she says it, she could refer to this video to basically as evidence to show that I led you to come to Nigeria, and I get all of these explanations you've given, but I led you. So I'm going to take that to heart. Whenever I see her, I will tell her thank you for bringing you down here. So one thing is generally what keeps you up at night? What's basically, because you are now in the field. Oh, by the way, you do a lot of things. You are still an independent director at MTN. You wear many hats. What keeps you up at night? What is what's the scariest thing about what you're currently doing? And what do you think you could have done differently? What keeps you up at night? That would be the best way to put it.
I think people-related issues. What I mean by people-related issues is that in building a company, the companies I'm involved in, it's do I have the right partner? How do I know that person's the right partner? How do I incentivize, motivate them, keep them? Or alternatively, is this the wrong person? And if it's the wrong person, what is the cleanest, neatest, respectful way to exit that person? And the same context also when investing in companies is the same context, because issues are less about the business plan and execution. It's more about, do you have the right partners with the same values, and how are you really sure that that's the right partner? And I always use the analogy that investing and partnering with people in many ways is like marriage. Once you've partnered with the person, you're in effectively in marriage, and there are ups and downs, but you have to figure out how to make it work. And you always wonder, did I pick the right partner? And how do I know? And you only really know, post fact, whether you've made a good decision or not. You don't really know before. So I think that's what keeps me up on the business side. And of course, on the personal side, it's always family, trying to figure out how to balance, work and family commitments. Children are growing and are no longer children; they're now young adults, and how to keep engaged and help them navigate their own issues. So I think those are probably the two buckets of things that keep me up at night.
Okay, so how do you go forward? Because I can imagine at some point you probably have to beat yourself for saying, oh, well, my kid has to be somewhere and I can't take them on. There's so many issues in business, especially when you're doing business in Nigeria and Greater Africa. What keeps you going on? What's the motivating thing? What does that look like?
Yes, so I guess a number of things there. One, I guess, is alluding to is how to manage different commitments, and that is always hard, and there are no easy answers, and you can't do everything at the same time. So it's trying to figure out at that point in time what should be prioritized and why, and then another point in time how to prioritize this other thing, and And I haven't gotten it perfect. So, and anybody that tells you that they've mastered it is probably not telling you the full picture. It's very hard to manage personal and business commitments, and it's helpful because I think Ndidi and I share, both investment work and, personal allocation in terms of dividing what we do, when we do it, how we do it. So that sharing helps. And but it's not an easy balance. And I see a question that came up about prioritizing agriculture, and maybe let me touch on a little bit on some of the journey to where I am today, because in the beginning I just rushed over a quick overview. But in 2008, 2009, we were living in Senegal, and I was a part of a private equity firm there. And Ndidi and I were shocked and surprised about how much in the supermarkets were imported. And this is not unique to Senegal. This is Nigeria, this is Ghana, this is Cote d'Ivoire. And you go to supermarkets and quite a bit is imported, quite a bit of food. And we felt that this doesn't make sense, that we grow many of these different things. It can be processed. It's probably very difficult to do. But if you put in the hard work, then you could build something here. And so we made the decision at the time, and actually I should step back and mention, around that time when we were looking at opportunities, Ndidi asked me, what sector excites me? Because I worked in many different sectors, telecoms, oil and gas, financial services. And at the time, I said, any sector that makes money, I'm excited. I wasn't particular to the sector, just to give some context. But then the more I spent looking at agribusiness, and the more I saw, wait a minute, that there is an opportunity to do well here financially, but at the same time also impact lives. It's much harder to do that in oil and gas, for example. You can make lots of money in oil and gas, but it's harder to have a broader impact in a range of people's lives. So we decided that we were going to dive in and put personal savings, family money into a greenfield startup food processing company. And we got a location in Ojokoro on the outskirts of Lagos, a small rented building to start Ace Foods. And for us, it was really trying to understand how to start a food processing company. That and the many stories around challenges we faced starting and building. That company has grown. It showed us what it took to build and scale an SME food processing company. Employs roughly 150, 170 people across all functional units today. Is run by an incredible managing director, Gloria Wabuike, who is ex-Nestle, ex-Chi. And she joined us last year. And prior to that, we had another MD the previous 10 years. So it's been run by a strong independent management team the last 12 odd years. So we're shareholders, we're on the board, but the company has grown. In 2011, we started to do some consulting work. And quite frankly, when we are all in with our investments into operating assets, and you have school fees to think of, you're trying to think, okay, how do I now make some money to pay bills? And we're ex-consultants, ex-bankers. So say, you know what, we can do advisory work. And then small projects became bigger projects. We had credibility because we had an operating assets. We effectively got paid to learn. And then the more we learned, the more we built expertise, the more we got bigger projects and then bigger projects. And then Ndidi then oversaw that Sahel Consulting up until about 4 years ago. And today the firm has about 50 full-time employees, about another 40 project-based employees out of 5 locations in northern Nigeria, Abuja is the main office, and has been run by an incredible management team. Temi Adegoro is the managing partner, also Aisha and Chinedu, 2 other partners. So they have been driving the business the last 4 or 5 years, and we're just on the board and shareholders. But that really gave us perspective on different value chains, issues in different sectors, etc. Now, in the early years, we felt we would do another operating company investment and another one after that. But then in 2013, the Nigerian government and the German government wanted to bring new capital to the agricultural sector. and anchor a fund. And they, they then did an RFP process to figure out who is going to manage this fund. And I remember at the time thinking that, what, it seems like God has prepared this fund for us, because everything we're doing to date seems to lead to this. And we were fortunately selected to manage that fund, FAFIN. And the way I think about it is probably because we were active in the sector before there was money on the table, which then gave credibility that we're really serious about this sector. Plus, we had the right background and experiences. We launched in 2014. We raised more money from international investors, original international investors, by 2017. And then we launched a private credit fund 2022 in partnership with other investors. And then Sahel Capital has grown today. And that's where I really spend my day to day. And Sahel Capital today has roughly 20 people in 3 offices, Lagos, Abidjan, Nairobi, and split between doing equity and private credit. And effectively backing different entrepreneurs, family-owned businesses to see how to build and scale. And so going to the original question, I went from being sector agnostic, where makes money, because ultimately, we're impacting lives, but ultimately want to build sustainable businesses that are creating economic value for ourselves, for other shareholders, other partners. And it's only if it's sustainable and the businesses can scale, does it make sense? And so the combination of both for me has been very exciting. And I can't imagine doing anything else the past 15 years that I've been focused on this. And it's some of my more recent board initiatives. I think for me, it is really just, it's good to get perspective on other sectors, other things that are going on, not just, I think people tend to think I'm agribusiness, which is true, but I've also worked in other sectors. So also having that, being able to engage and give perspective has also been important for me over the years.
Before you answer that question, I was going to even tell our audiences how currently you are in telecom. You are in HMO, on the board of telcos, on the board of HMOs. You are basically in agri, but I wouldn't say agri. I'm not sure whether I would say you are in the full value chain, whether you are in the midstream. I know you are in the downstream, you are in the midstream, but are you in the upstream, basically in the farms? Do you get up to that level? Do you do any business there, or do you just support farmers to do that? Because I see a lot of agro people joining, so it's best to help them show where exactly you play in, and
sure,
so I can help them form their questions.
Sure. So first of all, I'm a finance person who has learned agriculture. Let me caveat that. So I can speak about agribusiness in depth, but I'm at heart a finance person at core. And we are across the entire value chain in different forms and others. And so on the equity side, we partnered with Costaris to do Costaris Farms, which is integrated rice farming, rice milling, there's irrigation, there's huge farming infrastructure. And we partnered with Costaris Group between 2018 till end of 2023 to help build and scale that operation. We also partnered with Cardinal Stone to do cassava starch related in Kogi. We have a poultry operation in Kwara, Dainty Farms. So if you're going to buy frozen chicken, buy Dainty Farms frozen chicken. Great product, and I'm not biased. We also partnered with LNZ, MD Abubakar and his family in Kano and he has a dairy farm and produces yogurts and aggregates milk from pastoralists, and the yogurt is a formal trade across the country. We've also, in our credit fund, financed cocoa exports in Ghana, avocado exports in Kenya. We've done hibiscus exports in Nigeria. We've financed warehouse in Nigeria and Ghana. We've done, bull genetics, effective semen in Kenya for farmers and their cows. We've done aquaculture in Uganda. So we've done a broad range. And I think the way we think about it is really, well, first of all, I think we do it probably smarter today than we did it 10 years ago, because you always learn from mistakes and build and correct and see how to scale. And I think the big takeaway for us over the years is risk mitigation and how do you manage risk, not just from a individual investment perspective, but also a portfolio perspective. So from a portfolio perspective, we have asset allocation across geographies, which is why today we have investments in 7 countries. 5 years ago, we only had in one country, Nigeria. So today, from a geographic perspective, there's some risk mitigation there. From a revenue source perspective, there's also risk mitigation in terms of underlying cash flows and what the revenue basis is, dollar, naira, CDs, whatever it is. From a individual company perspective, we really spend a lot of time focusing on our partners, because if we look back over the years where we've had issues, not always, but for the most part, it is for whatever reason we had a wrong partner, and which makes things difficult in execution. And so we spend a lot of time on the partners, and then yes, of course, we have legal agreements, we have protection rights. There are many of different things we do around structuring, but ultimately it's at partner level. Today, we are probably doing less on the farming side and more on closer to consumer. And the reason is, and those that do farming know farming is hard. It's not easy to do. And to do farming, you need long-term, reasonably priced capital. And for us today, easily 98% of our capital today is dollar denominated. So with dollar denominated capital, we can do farming in the Francophone countries because it's euro linked, and so there's less of devaluation risk here and there, but it's harder to take dollars and put into farming. Now, with that said, we are also in the process of actively raising domestic capital and domestic Nigeria and domestic long-term capital, because to address food security, you do need to do food production. And the question then is, how do you then structure those longer-term, reasonably priced investments to around food production, which is effectively farming, and do it in a commercial way that makes sense. So yes, but less farming today than we did 5 years ago. More manufacturing, food processing, logistics, things around that.
Okay, I have some questions coming in, but I wanted just the listeners to just put their questions on the chats so that we can take them as we're going. There is something that came up from Ridwan Bedo about the SEF funds, and I will take that later because it delves into taking you into more of the consulting, and I would like to know more about some of the things you've done. Basically, I don't know if you could give us your 2 best success stories, because you told us a lot. The Kenyan projects, the Francophone West Africa. I would like, before we even delve into that, from what I gathered from what you said, devaluation is one of the reasons, or let me say balancing your risk is one of the reasons why you went to Africa. But you recently just did that, like COVID time, 2020, 5 years ago. What made you decide to take the leap? What did you see that made you go outside Africa, and why? Because my understanding of African business is probably one of the hardest things you would ever do if you're coming from Nigeria. It's a different, I would say, culturally, we are the same, but it's just a different way they do business outside, across Africa, as far as being the republic just next to us. So I don't know what took you out of, what made you decide to go out into Africa?
Sure. So started looking at opportunities in 2022. First investment was January 2023. We've done circa, if I remember my numbers correctly, 26, 27 odd investments outside Nigeria since. And so the way to think about it is from the Sahel Capital perspective, we're managing capital for investors, and investors want return, and they want risk mitigation. So if they're going to entrust us with their capital, we have to show that we can manage that money in a way that mitigates risk. And if we went back to the investors and said, yes, it's been a challenging macroeconomic environment in Nigeria, but we're just going to do the same thing we did the past 10 years, it would not be received very well. And then also for ourselves is, we just figure out how do you generate appropriate returns. It's to say, okay, you know what, we need to mitigate risk. We need to leverage also the lessons we learned in Nigeria, the industry expertise, and then to take that out. We also need to see what can we learn from other markets and then also bring it into Nigeria. So I was thinking long-term about building a private capital business platform and then saying, how do we do this? At the same time, we were fortunate that one of our investors effectively said, we want to do private credit across Africa. And we were able to co-create a strategy with them. And effectively, they backed us to then go. And it's very helpful. So it's not that we went and said, we want to do Africa, give us money. We effectively had an investor that said, you know what, we want to do broader. We like what you've done. Let's do it together. And then we've then built with them. So that made it easier. And of course, the more we've done, the more we've built expertise. And I'll probably say the first year was sort of a learning curve. Now, you're right, you can't take Nigerians and go do a deal in Kenya. You can't take Nigerians and go do a deal in Cote d'Ivoire. It doesn't work. And so there are two things we did actively over the last 4 years. So if you looked at Sahel Capital in 2021, actually, let me back, 2020, we were 70% men, and most of the men and most of the women were more mid and junior. And I joke with, or my team jokes with me that, interestingly, probably of that, most were Southwest, and probably most of Southwest were from Ekiti State. so I just highlighted no diversification at all in terms of, and it wasn't planned, it just happened. And then we then said, you know what, if we're going to do Africa, and even if to do Nigeria effectively, we need a more diverse team. And how do we actively enable that? And then it was not an easy process, but we went through a number of different things that we did. And today we are probably 50% men, women at all levels, and also call it 50%, 48% Nigerian, non-Nigerian. So effectively half our team is from Kenya, Cameroon, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, different countries in the region. And it's having people who are on the ground, know the countries, the cultures, the language, makes a huge difference. And so when we recruit today, I think we're very conscious about having people that understand the markets in which we invest and can also build connections with the entrepreneurs and families that we want to build connections with. And I think that's very important, because even if you look at us in Nigeria, we've done investments in practically every key ethnic group, geopolitical zone, expatriate families that have been in Nigeria for generations. And so you need to build trust, you need to be able to connect, you need to be able to show you can also add value to their businesses. And the same way that we spend time trying to understand, can we partner with this family or this group? They also spend time saying, is Sahel the right partner for us? What's their reputation? Should they partner with us or not? So they also have to go through that process. So I guess it's a long response, but I think it's if we're going to do right by investors, we have to think longer term diversification, risk mitigation. And I think that, and then to do it effectively, we also have to change the nature of our team to enable that, the skill sets, the backgrounds, etc., to enable us to execute effectively.
Thank you. So there's one question I asked. What is your best project? What is your best success story? What would you like to highlight in in since this 15 years around agribusiness or the agri projects that you have? What more like what is the most emotional projects that you had that you love? That if you had to do a business case today, that's what you bring out.
That's a hard question. Is like pick your favorite child.
Everybody has a favorite child. You just don't tell them.
No, so I will. Well, I think I'll mention two. One is a sale capital investment, and the other is Ace Foods. And on the Ace Foods side, I remember I was there on day one when we effectively paid the rent and got the keys to this house that we then were going to renovate in Ojokoro to do our, we just had very basic, equipment. And I fast forward today, we have, we bought a factory in Songota in 2012. We're building a new one because we've overgrown our existing capacity near Abeokuta. And the team has grown, the team is great, they're executing. And so if I look back over the last 15 years of seeing that growth, for me, that's very exciting. Of course, every year is a new challenge, new opportunity, things you need to fix, things you need to address. But just seeing that growth and where it is today for me, it's very exciting. And I think many of you probably know the products in the supermarket shelves, but we also provide products as ingredients to many of the large FMCG companies in different sectors. And being able to partner with many of them over the years has been quite exciting. So for me, that is, and if you don't have Ace Foods in your kitchen shelves, make sure to pick it up next time you go to the supermarket. And the other is on the sale capital side is our first investment, and in LNZ Integrated Farms in Kano. And it's because it was our first investment. It's like it's like your first child. It sticks out. It is MD Abubakar and his family, great partners. It took 9 months of discussions with him and his wives before we then agreed to then do the investment. We had to speak to every one of them. And we worked very well together to help the company grow and help put in place structures, helped with getting the products across the country. And then we partnered with them for 7 years, and then eventually structured a process where we then sold our stake back to them. And then the business has even grown substantially since we even left, and then doing even better moving forward. So I probably mentioned them just because it was our first investment, and then it was a great partnership. And great partnership doesn't mean that things are perfect. It just means that we're able to work together well through, ups and downs of over the years, addressing issues, eventually getting to a point where we were both happy with outcomes.
Thank you for that. So I'm trying to take that into your entrepreneurship field, what you have done, how you have managed to do it. And one thing I noticed when you were talking at the beginning was each of your companies are, well, minus the Sahel, where you are basically the managing partner, Sahel Capital. All of the other companies now have their own managing directors. And I like the way you said it. You were actually very proud of the teams that you had. And you had somebody work with you for 10 years before giving it someone else. From a lot of people that come to Triad, it is about helping entrepreneurs. So we would like to know from your experience, what advice could you give them? What you could tell them, or just tell us how you started, what were the challenges you faced, and from your experience, what advice would you give them?
Sure, and I'm assuming with this year, you're probably more referring to team-related issues and building teams. Is that?
Building teams, sourcing capital, managing Nigeria, for example, regulatory partnerships, things like that. It's a loaded question, but it would be nice to just see how you tell them how you did some of those things, because it will form some of the answers, questions that we get, because the entrepreneurs are actually here as well.
Sure. So Nigeria is a tough environment, but it is not, challenges are not unique to Nigeria. So there are other countries that have equivalent or worse challenges. Of course, there are countries that have it easier. So I think the first comment is the issues faced are not unique. And so so there also should not be an excuse to delivering performance, because it's more about understanding what those issues, challenges are, and then figuring out how do you wrap support around yourself to enable you overcome those challenges and build and scale your businesses. Because there are people who have done it before, and it's really access to information. Many people point to capital and finding financing as a challenge, but I've found that that's really not the case, because if you have a well-structured business, people view you as a person of integrity, effectively reputation, it is easier to bring in capital. And really then becomes, how are you structuring, what are you building, and what does it need? So as an example, when we started Ace Foods in 2010, I did not have manufacturing experience. I did not have food experience. I had never dealt with NAFDAC. I did not know what a hammer mill was, or a blender was, or, there are many things I didn't know. I could write a business plan, but I've never done it before. And I think similar context with Ndidi. And what we then said, okay, we know what we know. We also know what we don't know. So on day one, we set up a board that had individuals on it who filled in the gaps of our experience. And these were not necessarily ultra successful people with, it's not about, it's more about who do we know that is willing to give us their time, because we didn't have money to pay board fees in the early days at all, and then later only nominal board fees. Who's willing to give us their time? Who do we respect? And in their own area of expertise, they had, they knew what they're talking about. So we had a SAN lawyer who was a friend of ours on the board. We had somebody who had run his own company for a number of years. We had a marketing person. We had a good mix of people and experiences. And the person who had a manufacturing company effectively had his QC person help walk us through NAFDAC. He had their production supervisor help come give us advice on our factory. And I use the word factory, but just view it as a renovated building. We converted a parking lot to where we're putting our machines. We had, and so that process where we could learn from others helped. And then on day one, we weren't thinking of ourselves as a tiny business. We're thinking of ourselves as we want to grow to be something bigger. So on day one, we had our accounts in order. We're filing literally payee from day one, VAT from day one. We were, management accounts, financial reports, all the things, quarterly board meetings, all the things you would expect that you would do when you're bigger. We're doing that on day one, trying to figure out how do we put that structure in place from day one, and then slowly grew from there, because it's easy to do it. It's easier to do it from day one. It's harder to operate haphazardly and then try and put structure in. So it's just easier organic, because then you can see what works, you adjust, what works, you adjust. And so in that context, we built and scaled. Now, just because we did that doesn't mean it was easy, because I can remember one year, and I'm forgetting the exact year, it's probably, call it 2014, at Ace Foods, where Ndidi said she's not doing it again. We should just close it down. It's too difficult. And I said, no, that we can still move. We can still move. Then maybe the next year or 18 months later, I told her, you know what, I'm not doing it again as well. And then she said, no, that's okay. We are having momentum. And then the following year, both of us said, you know what, true, we're not doing it again. This thing is too tough. Let's close it. And it was our board that told us, no, that we'll support you guys. You guys should keep on going. We're not allowing you to quit. And they now helped us in terms of just working through that difficult patch. And I mentioned that because it is, the bigger you get, the problems don't diminish, they just become bigger problems. And you just have to figure out how do you adjust your capacity and your support network to overcome those bigger problems. And because you can't do it alone. And so you need the people around you, to do it. And yes, so that's how we built and scaled. Even at Cell Capital, it's not me. I have two partners, Deji Adebusoi and Tosin Joe, that are my partners. I had other partners as well that started with me that have gone to do other things, but still support us indirectly. And then the team as well is solid. So there's no way I can be going to Kenya to do a deal or Abidjan to do a deal. The people there, they're top notch, they execute, they know what they're doing. And so it's really just how, for me, it's how do I support, where are the gaps, how do I plug in? But then you just build little by little, and then it doesn't happen on day one, and then you grow from there.
Is it safe to say one of the things that you're basically strong in is finding the right people? Because you're bored, let me start with your wife, then you're bored, finding the right set of people to partner with. Is that possibly maybe your superpower?
What definitely the best decision is my marriage to Didi. Definitely the best decision. And this is being recorded, of course, so she will see it. No, but I don't know whether I'm an expert in picking people, and I probably would say I still struggle, and everybody struggles because it's not math or science. They're very soft issues, and I think it's just being open to listen and engaging, and then it's easy to pick people. It's hard to have people go. So it's not just picking; it's also changing team, and that's probably the hardest to do. But if maybe I'll do it this way. If I say what do I believe my strength is, I would probably say attention to detail and a willingness to learn. That is probably what I would characterize as my own strength, attention to the build. And because what I know today is definitely very different what I knew 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So just trying to understand, learn everyday details about different things. So early on, I mentioned I'm a finance person, but I can talk in depth about agriculture just because, I've spent time with the details. But I'm not an accountant, but I also know quite a bit about accounting, law. So I've gone into the details. So I understand issues, because I've spent, so attention to detail and willingness to learn. I probably have to say where my strengths are.
Okay. Thanks. So just because we're short on time, and I would like the people on board to actually listening to us to ask their questions. If they could put those questions in, it would be nice, and we might just hold a few people to ask questions. I would like to ask, and one thing I noticed is you are actually in a segment where you do a lot of impact investing, and when farming, when anything that comes to agriculture comes, you said a lot about how you partner, how you work with people, how you had to diversify your team. What is your best impact story, or what is one of your top impact stories that you could share with us? And one of the things I'm asking this is because we have to actually help others to help ourselves. But we should also do it in a very altruistic manner, actually not need anything. I think you are in both of this. So I'd like to know your impact story, one of the impact story you liked the most and where it was, and if you could help. Well, yeah, that's the question. The impact story, the best one, one of your best top 10 impact you have done, especially in the agro space, that you can share with us.
That's a hard question, but I think instead of picking one, maybe I'll just talk from a big picture perspective across the board, some of the things that we've done from an impact perspective. And in no particular frame. So from a farmer engagement, through our companies, we probably interface with over 100,000 farmers and source from over 100,000 farmers across all the different companies we engage with. And some of this is more directly in terms of helping set up outgrow networks for different companies. Others more indirect, just in terms of ensuring that the companies we invest in are buying locally their raw materials versus importing. Of the 8 equity investments we've done in Nigeria, probably 4 have moved into different forms of renewable power off-grid for different aspects of the operation. From an infrastructure build perspective, I think what Charis has been able to do is quite amazing, because in 2018, there was only 300 hectares of rice cultivated. Today, there is a 36,000 ton a year rice mill there. It's a 2,000 hectare farm. They've done significant irrigation, probably 20 kilometers of irrigation and drainage channels, another 10, 15 kilometers of road infrastructure, dikes. So if you then go and see the farming infrastructure there, it is very, very significant, a big investment to produce rice paddy, which then goes into the mill. We've and just employment across the companies we've operated in. And then of course on the individual basis, there are specific stories of where we've gone to the companies, and I'm not mentioning specific company names, but gone to the companies. Maybe they had a high debt load. We helped restructure the debt load, reduce that debt load, fix operations, expand, go into new business lines, in a range of different things that if you looked at the company before and after in terms of infrastructure building and what they've done, pretty substantive. I think for some of what we're doing outside of Nigeria on the credit side, it is going into companies to say, okay, we can give you, and by the way, we're not concessionary, so we're doing dollar lending, it's market rates. But we're not just saying, here's money, give us collateral. We're also saying, okay, here's what you need to do to attract equity in the future. You need to do this on your board, build your board, add to the board. You need to strengthen your management function. You need to do a certain number of different things to help you then get equity capital in the future. And, one of the reasons why we also wanted to do private credit and smaller ticket size is in many ways, it is easier for people find it easier to borrow money and pay back. But when you now talk about them issuing equity or staking their company, is a much harder decision. And because really is more longer term partnership, while so if you view an equity investment as marriage, a loan is dating. If it doesn't work out, you pay back the loan and move it on to somebody else. And so for us, private credit is a way to get to know the entrepreneurs, the families, the business people, to say, is this a company that 1, 2, 3, or 4 years could be interesting for an equity investment? At the same time, it also gives a chance for the entrepreneur and the family to get to know us and say, okay, do we like the engagement? And is this something that would also want to partner with them on the equity side in the future? So which is why we're also taking that approach in terms of what we've done. And of course with team, just seeing team grow and how we've grown with team over the years, and I think has been very rewarding as well. I think even Ace Foods on the factory side, for example, we've had adult educational courses for a number of years, so that the factory workers can also improve their literacy in terms of, and just so those little things like that as we've grown and expanded has been quite exciting. And across all the companies, we've also given equity incentives. So we've been quite happy to reduce our equity stake to allow other team members have equity. And the way we thought about it is, if the individual is creating and can create significant value, such that the pie grows, we're happy to have a smaller piece of a bigger pie. Then, and if the equity provides the right incentive, then yes, we'll give it. But at the same time, of course, if equity doesn't provide the incentive, we will not give it. But it's trying to match that equity with the right group of people that it will be meaningful for them to then help build the companies.
Okay, thanks. Just to help our viewers, Mezuo and his team has raised over $100 million in capital equity businesses. And this is why I want to segue into Sahel consulting. And when it comes to capital and we have entrepreneurs on board. And the first question everybody goes, and you've mentioned it, equity and debt. What is better? When do you pick? How do you raise? And for the listeners here is, how can you help them? Or do you only look at investors, or do you wait for the investors or get investment and go look for the downstream, the entities that need it? Or do you basically get both sides and match them?
Sure. So, well, first of all, just to mention, so I'm speaking about three companies: Ace Foods, Sahel Consulting, and Sahel Capital. Yes. But the important thing to mention is that beyond them having Indeed and I being shareholders in all three, they actually are independent companies, independent boards, and don't overlap in terms of work that they do. So Sahel Capital people have zero insights into what's going on at Ace Foods, and Ace Foods has zero insights. So they run as very distinct companies, governance structures, etc. So that's the first thing to mention. So beyond commonalities of founders, they operate very independently with separate teams. And I think we've done that for the importance of governance, because different stakeholders, all of that stuff. So we don't cross share. Sahel Consulting, Sahel Capital started as one firm, and then we split. And so today, beyond collaborating on CSR and knowledge share initiatives, they also operate independently. Now, Sahel Consulting, interestingly enough, has not done financial advisory and capital raise historically. And the reason they have not done that is so we don't create a conflict of interest with Sahel Capital, where people feel that they need to go to us for advice to then get money for us. So historically has not been the case. So a lot of work they do is for international clients around food systems. They work for a lot of international foundations, public policy, and it's around the science of agriculture and around development of policy, around some implementation, etc. So for example, one project that they've led for a number of years is a big client, international foundation, said, I want to see how to fix the dairy system in Nigeria, and I'm willing to fund this. And to fix dairy, for those that know the dairy sector, it's genetics, which is effectively the semen. It is nutrition, which is feed and fodder. It's water, so the cattle don't have to trek from Kano to Lagos. They can, be in one place, get access to water, so it's boreholes, and there's also offtake for milk. So the project was effectively doing genetics, boreholes, helping with feed and fodder, and linking to off-takers over a 5-year period was the project. Now, with that said, today the Sahel Consulting team can decide whichever project they want to take, including advisory. And I mean, they have the ability to do a broad range of things. There are 100 people there, so it's not a small firm. But I just wanted to stress that it's historically. Now, going to your question on raising capital. So the way we, Ace Foods raised family money, and then we did a friends and family private placement in 2012. We effectively went to our network to raise money, and since then we've not raised any money. So we've been fortunate to grow from cash flows, etc. We've had some little bit of grant support. We're able to grow organically, so we've not raised third-party capital. Sahel Capital itself, the way we're structured in managing third-party money, we effectively have to go and raise money from primarily international investors. And that's easily a 3-year process. So effectively, we're spending 3 years pitching Nigeria, pitching Africa, pitching agribusiness, and then going to Paris, Amsterdam, Frankfurt, London, wherever. And of course, even here in Nigeria, going around to then say, how can we, here's our plan, here's our strategy, give us capital. And then they would then subscribe and then effectively back us for 10 years with that pool of money to invest. And then we then go and invest, I think is a summary of how we've operated. And so in Nigeria, for example, Nigeria Sovereign Wealth Fund has been a big support of us, and they've been very instrumental in seeing how can they fix infrastructure in Nigeria, how can they allocate capital to the agriculture sector. And they were one of our investors in our first fund and also into the next fund. So it's a long process. It's not an easy process raising the money. And I joke that I had hair before I started, and now I have no hair. but it is not an easy process. Now, with that said, 100 million sounds like a lot of money, but Nigeria needs tens of billions of dollars of capital across different sectors to fix and address issues. And a lot of the money is coming from offshore, but for us is how do we unlock domestic capital and for that domestic capital to be incentivized to allocate money to not just some of what we're doing, but into other sectors. Because the unlocking that domestic capital would be very key to driving economic development, not just in our sector that we operate in, but many other sectors. But raising capital is not easy. And anybody that's involved in the process will tell you it's not an easy process because you're not just selling the opportunity you have on the table, you're also trying to match it to the investors' own expectations and what they're trying to achieve themselves. Now, I think even thinking about this for many entrepreneurs, it is, you want to raise capital, and for some of you may feel that anybody that gives me money is great, let me just get the money. And I would just want to caution on that because it is not everybody's money that you should take, because it is making sure you spend time aligning to ensure that the partner you pick is the right partner in terms of values, value addition to your work, etc. And I'll take extra time and waiting longer to find the right partners versus just taking money because there's a feeling I need money to solve a problem, because then that can trigger. So I guess the feedback is not everybody's money you take. You should just make sure that the group you're taking money from is aligned with what you're trying to achieve and values.
Thank you. Just some questions just to read off. Because you mentioned you support family business, the Helen Farms, I believe Helen Farms in Kaduna. LNZ in Kano. In Kano. So this is now taking some part of your advisory. A lot of family businesses are struggling. Do you have criteria for investing or partnering with such businesses?
So I would approach that question from two ways. So first of all, I guess from the perspective of we're looking for a company to partner with. So we have partnered with family-owned businesses. We've also partnered with businesses who are not necessarily family-owned. But ultimately, what we're looking at is, are the people, do they understand the business? Are they credible? What are their values? And are we aligned? And what I mean aligned is, if the family wants to keep the business in the family for the rest of their life and no outsiders, there's probably less of an alignment. If the family is saying, you know what, we're looking at building a proper company, family may be involved, may not be involved, we just focus on finding the best managers for the business. And we're working towards an event where 5, 6, 7 years down the road, shareholders can have an exit event to sell their shares, then there's alignment. And so, to put it simply, so many private equity investors say, you want if you're looking to partner, you want a partner that wants to be rich, not to be king. Because a king would make suboptimal decisions to remain king or CEO versus to make money. By somebody who wants to make money, it doesn't matter who is the MD, as long as everybody's making money together and the company is growing. So it's just anyways, it's just trying to find that right alignment in terms of partnerships. And it doesn't mean that, and by the way, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong about businesses growing and remaining family owned, but it's just around the thought process that even if it's family owned, is the best family member that is managing that business, as an example. And that best family member can be the wife, not the husband. It can be the youngest son, not the oldest son. It can be the daughter, not the son. Or it could be, let's get a third-party manager, but families on the board. But it's making sure you're thinking through those different dynamics, because and then from a different perspective, from even if you think about Ace Foods, it is because you're a family-owned business doesn't mean that certain things should be ignored. So for example, even with Ace Foods, I had an employment contract with KPIs and scope of work. Indeed, had an employment contract with KPIs and scope of work. And so it's whether you're a husband-wife business, broadly, siblings, whatever it is, there needs to be documentation of what the expectations are, what the KPIs are, what people are going to be paid, and you also don't commingle funds. Now, if you're envisioning being a family-owned business, no outsiders for the rest of your life, then whatever you do with your business, you do with your business. But if you're going to bring in outsiders, then you can't commingle. You have to create clear separation, and that structure is important to start on day one. Otherwise, when investors come and look at your business, they will not give you money. And then you now say, it's too difficult to raise money. I'm trying so hard to raise money. And really the issue was your business was not structured well. And that's why you couldn't get funding.
Thank you for that. On capital as well, there was a question from everyone about the SEF funds. And he wanted to know how to create similar for mid-sized players looking for 50 to 20K. $50,000 to $20,000, I believe. So yeah, I don't know if you could help us come into that, and if you just need to reach out to Sahel Consulting or Capital to help.
Yeah, so if I understand the question, and I'm trying to find the question, is it that he wants to create something, or she wants to create something similar to SIFA, but for smaller ticket sizes? Was that a question? Okay.
So you just want, yes. I don't know if read one is on, still on, if you could share more light.
Yes, I see the question now. So the way I would characterize it is there is a need for companies trying to raise $50,000, companies trying to raise $100,000, or maybe to keep it in narrow, the companies that need 20 million, 50 million, 100 million, the different rates. So the need is there. The question though is, how do you structure a fund or a pool of capital to address that need in a way that provides the expected return for investors with the appropriate risk mitigation? And when you do all the thought process around it, effectively what the outcome is that the smaller the amount you give, the harder it is to preserve the money and get the return and do the risk management. And because of that is the reason why everybody shies away from it. The same time it takes to do a $5 billion investment is the same time it takes to do a $100 million investment. And at the same time, the $5 billion investment is probably going into a company that is structured well, and the $100 million is going to a company that is not structured well. So the question then becomes, if you want to do this, and assuming that you are raising money, so if it's grant money you're giving, that is grant money. But if you're raising money from investors that want a return, you have to develop a strategy and a plan to pitch to that investor that gives them confidence that if I give you 1 million naira to go implement your strategy, my 1 million naira is going to come back with a return that justifies the risk I'm taking, especially when I can put that money in government bonds at a return or in fixed deposits. So why should I, and if you're able to crack this and come up with a strategy to implement, then great. Let me come and learn from you as well, because it's not easy, but it is. So yes, I think the opportunity is there. It can be done. There needs to be a lot of thought around it on how to do it. Probably tech would make it easier to do, using tech in some form. But yes, there's an opportunity, there's a need, and there's also risk as well.
Okay, thank you. For our listeners, please, if you have questions, please raise up your hand. I'm just going through the questions in the chat. And you can put it in the chat as well. I have a question from AW. What strategies do you think will be successful in raising local patient capital for primary production? I know you're also talking about domestic raise, so if you could, and what size? Because one thing you said just now is size matters.
Yes, so for any entrepreneur, I would say that it's important to start small, figure things out, make your mistakes with small amounts, and then expand. If you're going to start big, then be prepared to make mistakes with big amounts of money, which is not easy to do, unless you're independently wealthy and have that ability. So start small, make mistakes, scale, and learn. And if it was easy to access that money, many more people would. But I think it is maybe is to be creative with where you're getting capital from. So yes, you can borrow money from the banks, but of course they want your house, your father's house, your uncle's house. But yes, you can borrow money from the banks, and there's a window where it makes sense. There are alternate lenders you can go to, but I think the prudent way is, okay, start and then saying, okay, who are family, friends, and bonds or others that know you and know your integrity, and then saying, I know there's a risk, but because of this person, I'll give him 1 million, 5 million, 3 million, 10 million, whatever that amount is, because they know you. And then what you then need to do is then take that money and do right by them to do the best you can with that amount of money. And then based on what you're able to execute on over 1, 2, 3 years, you can then go back and now say, this is what I've done with the, to a degree you're Christian, this is what I've done with my one talent. And then people then say, great, you've done X, Y, Z with this, what has been given to you. So it then makes it easier to then go and then raise money from other sources because of what you've then done. Now, at the same time, there are pools of grant money that are available. And grant money takes 9 months to 18 months to apply and to get, and it doesn't always come through, but it is worth going through that process. And I think grant allocators are very similar to equity investors or capital providers. They will give you a small amount on day one, and then they all talk to themselves. So if you do what you're supposed to do with that grant, because there's always action items you're supposed to do, then the next grant provider, when they're probably doing their own due diligence, will say, wait a minute, this person actually did not run away with the money and buy a car. He actually did what they're supposed to do. Then the next grant provider might then give a little bit more. So in the early years, for example, Ace Foods was fortunate that it was able to get grants from a range of different sources, different international groups. And we applied, we got grants, different sizes. And the grants will always be, you must do this with farmers, you must do that, you must do this. And then we do and document and execute. And some were straight grants, others were repayable grants, which were effectively 0% loans. But I think that was very, very helpful on the early years as we were expanding. So I think in a nutshell is don't try and raise billions on day one. It is a small amount so you can learn what you're doing, friends, family who know you. And if your father, your mother, your brother, your cousin will not give you money, you should ask yourself why. So if your own people that know you don't want to give you a little bit of money, there's an underlying reason why, because maybe they know you. That's why they're not giving you money. But at the same time, I think that is really the place to start, because those are the people that would be the most supportive of what you're trying to achieve. And I think we were fortunate as well when we did our private placement that we had friends around that were willing to give us a little bit to help us expand Ace Foods in 2012 when we then raised money then.
Okay, thank you. So Honor Williams asked, when you look at Nigeria and Ghana, I don't like comparing both because we seem to it's the size wise the size wise and the differences in the cultures across the countries are different. A bit Nigeria tends to be bigger, but if we put them together and try to measure them, it's always good because it helps us generally know what we're doing wrong or what we're not doing wrong and what we can learn from them, even though it's a smaller country. I know of the cocoa value chain that they have, which I think is pretty neat. Honor wants to know what is missing in Nigerian value addition gap, and what do you think can change the Nigerian landscape?
So is it specific to cocoa or to value chain, or just in
the
general?
value chain? So you could just speak maybe cocoa or something you are passionate about that you think, or generally, what do you think the Ghanaians are doing better than the agri value chain in Nigeria?
So I'll respond, but I think there's a lot of caveats and nuance that is important. So the straight response is that for many years, Ghana didn't have oil, they had cocoa. So they needed to make sure cocoa worked so they could help drive revenues. And so everything was aligned to enable cocoa to work, same with Cote d'Ivoire. So which means exports have to work, the trees must be there, the farmers must be supported. And so I think that's the overall context around Ghana and Ivory Coast. And they have their own issues as well that people complain about in terms of the cocoa board not paying on time, the farmers not getting their fair share of the pricing. So they also have their complaints. But I think because it's been a key source of government earnings, they focused on it. In Nigeria's case, the government did support cocoa, 60s, 70s, but then we discovered oil and oil was easier and more money. So they focused, left cocoa. But with that said, so one area with cocoa in Nigeria is that the trees are very old. The trees that are there, it was our grandfathers that planted, versus what you want are, you're continuously planting new trees growing so you can get better genetics, better yields from the plants, because as the trees get older, they yield less. Now, with that said, I know of at least one, if not two, players in the cocoa sector. One in particular that is run by an individual who I believe is in his 30s, that is doing phenomenally well, has attracted international capital, and there are players like that. And so I think and I'll touch a little bit on context as well, because I think we also need to be careful about framing that Nigeria is difficult, Nigeria is tough, it's impossible to do business here, which many people focus on that and then use that as a reason why things are not moving forward. And to reframe, because yes, things are tough, but there are more and also larger agribusinesses in Nigeria than they are in Ghana, and also than they are in Ivory Coast. So, and it's really driven by the size of Nigeria's economy, the population, which is consuming all kinds of food. And so that drives opportunity. And so you have, if you pick the poultry sector, for example, there are probably 4 or 5 integrated poultry companies in Nigeria that have revenues of over 40 billion naira. So you don't think of a poultry company having 40 billion naira revenue, but there are 4 that have above 40 billion. You go to Ghana, and then of course there are thousands of other poultry companies. And you go to Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, there are maybe 2 or 3 poultry companies. And you go to Nigeria, and then of course there are thousands of other poultry companies. And you go to Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, there are maybe 2 or 3 poultry companies. And you go to Nigeria, and then of course there are thousands of other poultry companies. And you go to Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, there are maybe 2 or 3 poultry companies. And you go to Nigeria, and then of course there are thousands of other poultry companies. And you go to Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, there are maybe 2 or 3 big ones, but those big ones are smaller than the ones here in Nigeria and the others. So there is the real opportunity to build and grow sizable companies in Nigeria, but it's a difficult environment. And maybe the way I view it is that it is possible that the business environment is easier in, and I use possible because every country has their issues. So infrastructure is better in Ghana, infrastructure is better in Cote d'Ivoire, but the market growth opportunity is smaller. And also structural issues that make it difficult for new entrepreneur entrants because the more established players sort of control the economy. So yes, so it's a long response with context is just to say that, in fact, I know of another company that is pretty sizable here in Nigeria that actually started in Ghana. And then going in Ghana was having issues and challenges. This is like 15 years ago. And they decided to open a location in Nigeria. And Nigeria grew so fast that they closed Ghana. And they're not in Ghana today. So, but it doesn't mean that you can grow big successful businesses outside Nigeria. And I know of another one that's in DRC, Cameroon, Benin Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, and are now looking to enter Nigeria. So, that happens as well. But it is so going back to my original comment is that yes, there are challenges in Nigeria, but there are challenges everywhere, and it's just trying to understand what are the challenges. What are my weak areas, and how do I surround myself with partners, advice, information that then helps me overcome whatever those challenges are. I think it's the way I'll put it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're short on time because I think we should be able to do this for another 2 hours, but we have about 8 minutes left. So I want to take, there are 2 questions. I want to take one from Badeshola, and also there's somebody that raised his hands. So let the person that raised his hand go forward, then we take Badeshola after. Rich Ventures, are you there? Are you still there, Rich Ventures? Okay. Let me just take Badeshola's own. Basically, is one lesson you've learned from investing in Nigerian agro business that surprised you, and why?
I have to think about that one that surprised me and why. That one has stopped something a little bit. Maybe I'll answer in a couple of ways and hopefully addresses it. I'll say that maybe it's my background as an investment banker, advisor, where a lot of what I did was structuring transactions and advising on transactions and developing the plans. And plans are, and maybe I'll put how I've changed my thought process is in the early days, a lot of time will go into the planning. And over the years, I've realized that plans are good and important, but as soon as you develop the plans, they go out the window because things change, execution is difficult, and it comes down to the people more than anything else. So you can have the best and greatest plans, the best and greatest deal structuring, but it really comes down to the people, person across the table. And so I wouldn't say it surprised me because I always knew that, but there's a difference between knowing theoretically and knowing from living through experiences. And so if anything, it is, so today I do look at plans and I do work on plans, but I probably am more attentive to people-related issues now than I was before. And maybe give an example. So in years past, we'll come across a company, maybe management isn't that great, and we say that this sector has phenomenal opportunity. The sector is great, and then we then say we will help strengthen management. We would do this, we'll do that, and fix the problem, find the people, and then based on that, we then execute this great business plan to tap the opportunity. And so, in other words, I would say we overestimated our ability to influence people, change all those people issues, and we're now just focused on this opportunity is the greatest. Today, I know we've walked away from at least one deal. We're in the engagement with the counterparty, and this is over many, many months, maybe even actually this is even almost 2 years. We now realize that, wait a minute, this partner is actually not listening to what we're saying. They only want to do what they want to do. They're really not listening, and we didn't do the deal because you don't want if somebody's already showing them certain behaviors. I'm not trying to figure out that I can fix who that person is, and it's not the right partnership. Or if a company needs to be fixed, we know how to fix, but it's just too painful. And we just say, no, we know how to do, we've done it before, but we'll not do it again. And so I think maybe we assumed that fixing and changing was easier. We know it's tough. We just assume we could do it. Nowadays, we say, you know what? It's better to spend our time elsewhere than try to do it. So I know it doesn't answer the question directly, but hopefully that can just give some context on maybe how our thought process has evolved over time.
It does actually add more to it. I think we need to start wrapping up. And one of the 2 questions for me would be, well, there are 3, but let me try and ask them in one. What would you ask your 27-year-old to do differently? And what does the future look like from a legacy of you and your wife, your family? What do you want the future to look like for your business and for the country, for Africa, when it comes to the businesses that you do, especially food?
Sure. So to my younger self, I think in my younger self, in my 20s, I felt I was more independent and did not ask for advice as much as I should, and probably relied more on my technical skills more than anything else. But if I was giving advice to that self today, it is to spend more time developing and engaging with mentors and advisors, because it is easy to walk the path with people guiding you than making mistakes and then now going back to now trying to figure out, okay, what should I now do? And I probably should spend more time, building, developing those relationships at a younger age. And I've learned to do it over the past 30 years. But I think it's never too late to start, but I should spend more time, more time doing that. In terms of legacy, I think for me, it's if I look back over the years, and that question is interesting because I don't think I'm in legacy mode yet. So I think I have another 10 years to go before I think about legacy. But in terms of what I would like to achieve, it is to build businesses that are regional players in their own right, not country specific, but are regional players, if not global players, and to build platforms that can compete on that global stage, so that we are engaging shoulder to shoulder with peers in other markets. And for that to be not just the companies where I'm a big shareholder, but also the entrepreneurs and families we support to enable them grow their own businesses to the point where they've scaled, and that those businesses outlive us to the next generation or to the next management team that is driving it. For me, that would be very exciting. Conversely, if businesses shut down after we left or they don't scale, then it'll be less excitement. But so building businesses that scale, survive generations, and are regional players, not just smaller country specific.
I would like to thank you very much. And sorry, we can't take your question because we're about to close out. I'd like to thank you, Mezuo, for your time.
Thank you.
I have gained so much in this short time. one thing that still comes to me, you might say that the best thing you have done is attention to details and willingness to work. I still think it is picking people, or you being picked by your wife, one of the two. One of the two. I did get that part of you being able to manage multiple businesses, but what I think is it still comes back to how you're picking people to do some of the work. You don't have to do everything. How you're bringing the community. I like the impact story. Yeah, just this has been fantastic for me because in my mind, I am just listening to a lot of these things and trying to put them together. And it's been an absolute pleasure for being on this side, listening to you, seeing what you have done. Please extend our gratitude to your wife. I don't think I tell people that a lot of things happen based on the partner that you take, and those people propel you to greatness. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're unmarried, pick the best wife or the best spouse. If you are married, work with your spouse a lot to try and see how you can build. I think what you do at home is very important. Be impactful, learn to work with people, pay attention to detail. But there was something you said that I really liked. We were going to build big businesses, so we did not wait until we became big to do what we needed to do. Putting in structure from day one, it's going to be hard, it's going to be uncomfortable, but you are going to say, I want to be a billionaire company. I want to be, well, no, I want to be 100 million, I want to be 200 million, I want to be a billionaire company. How you get there is what you start from day one. So thank you very much. I would hand over to Odabo to take this up. Oh, please just
yeah. So I'm just going to say, and one quick analogy on that is, building a foundation for a house. So if you're building a small house, you build a small foundation. If you're building a bigger house, you build a bigger foundation. And so just as an example and analogy. But thank you, Gani, very much for the time and for everyone for listening, and glad to have been able to share. So I appreciate the engagement.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gani, thank you for that amazing conversation. The facilitation was very, very nice. The gist was very interesting. Mr. Mezuo, thank you for bringing in nuggets of wisdom, your stories, how you started, and how your vision is very clear. Helping family businesses grow from where they are to create generational wealth. And you dedicating yourself to this journey is very, very inspiring. Thank you again for your time. For everyone that has joined, thank you. And we have these webinars every month, last Saturday of the month. It's powered by Triad Masterclass, and we have our quarterly sessions for business leaders, entrepreneurs looking to grow and scale their business. We should be having another masterclass by September. We'll let everyone know when the time is right. Thank you again, everyone. Look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you.